And in this tent was between the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia Mosque. They dug for electricity. Oh, it was a very interesting exercise. They really got it now. They stayed there for 7 weeks. It was during part of Ramadan. We had 450,000 visitors. And most of these young people who came there, they were weeping. Weeping. Right? They said, why don't we know about this? You see, they began to discover their identity. So we didn't realize that actually such information has an enormous transformation process on the minds of these young people. And hence it became really worthwhile to, and what we discovered, we had visiting books, right? We keep these visiting books, they get filled in every day. You know, say, right, Larry. We had 20,000 letters in the visiting book. Actually, it is fascinating to look at, and you can do a PhD on it on social, It really is incredible. What we discovered is, in general, there is an inferiority complex in the Muslim world. The absence of these names and of these contributions from these books causes inferiority complex. When you see, you don't respect your own people. You don't respect people who look like you. When you see the blue-eyed, pale-skinned, blonde hair, made by George or Edward and so on, you have respect. See, there is an inner subliminal in the conscience of many Muslims, Indians, Chinese, is that. It's because, in my view, it's because of this. Because they have been brought up, they say we have not contributed to anything to the civilization. It's the civilization, they are the architects of it. Right? So therefore, this has a strategic issue of personality, of identity, of inspiration. Young people need to be inspired so that they can do something for their society. We have a society that requires technology, it requires engineering, it requires medical, knowledge, it requires all the needs, agriculture, industry. So how do you get to get to what you want? How do you achieve your vision? Our vision is 2020, is 2030, your vision? 2020, right. Well, how will you achieve that without having young people who believe in it and sacrifice their time and so on? You cannot do it by just, putting some degrees, BSc, MSc, or higher studies. So you need more than that. This is good, but you need more than that. You need at least 10% of the young generation who believe in the mission itself and in the vision. How do you get this? If you start from a negative, from an inferior person, or you have in many of these rich countries, like oil-producing countries around the world, they have a problem with young people. They don't have they have no inspiration, no motivation. They don't want to study. I remember when I taught in Saudi Arabia for 1 year, and I had these people, they go, they like to drive taxis and so on, and they don't come to the classroom, they get free books, they get free education there. I said, look here, why don't you do this? Sir, why do I have to do this? Salary, high salary. My father doesn't know how to write his name, and he is millionaire. If he dies, I will inherit wealth for the next 100 years. Why do you want me to do this? The way you do it is you bring in this heart, this spiritual being which is surrounded by the physical body. Right? You speak to that and show what do you think he is created for? What is the purpose of life? And then if he is a religious person, then you bring in the other issue of what is the meaning of Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, right? Or alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. So these young people begin to re-perceive themselves. In fact, re-perception became an important issue of this process. The Western people, they began to re-perceive their history. When you discover facts that are new, the mindset, which is built on historical accumulation of knowledge. See, you and I, all of us, we have different mindsets. We have different identities. It is through our mindset, through our identity, that we communicate with each other. Right? I see you through that. You see me through that. But if you analyze, you see many people think that identity is not changeable. Mindset is not changeable. It's already formed. But if you analyze, you take this mindset and you spray it on the table and find out what is in it. You find about 80 to 90% of acquired knowledge. It's not indigenous knowledge, it's acquired knowledge. The rest is genetical, inherited. The rest is not. And this knowledge comes from family, from schools, and from society. Now, if you re-perceive that content, the mindset will change. And if the mindset changes, normally, people change their attitude. Normally, people change their attitude. The change of attitude is not a robotic process. Right? It doesn't mean that if you see something bad, your attitude will be to do something good. Maybe you'll agree with it. Right? The attitude is something that one has to decide for himself. When you get angry, your husband or your wife causes a problem, then maybe there's some insulting word or something. You can go back and insult again, or you can decide, no, I'm going to be peaceful. I'm going to behave well. So it's a decision. The attitude is a decision process. And when you decide on a particular attitude, you begin to organize. Now, we've developed actually a tool which is to do with, we call it Be the Future. And that tool is this. This has been developed from a group of consultants and members that we have who believe in what we're doing, and who believe that actually what we're doing is not a question of enjoying history, but actually what you're doing is you're changing the mindsets of people. And it is important for those who have been brought up as superior and those who have been brought up as inferior, this should reduce the inferiority, reduce the superiority. People should be talking to each other, because talking to each other and intercultural respect is extremely important. Is extremely important for the future of the world. If you don't have respect, then you're in trouble, right? So this slide, I don't want to go into this because it's to do with management, but just to point out that actually the mental model or mental mindset, as soon as you re-perceive, it affects that, and then you begin to change the attitude. When you change the attitude, you communicate, and when you communicate, you're actually organizing, and this thing is continuous and a continuous process. So that brings us to two things. One is this business of when you change attitude. By the way, all these pictures, they're all about inventions. There are thousands of inventions. Some of them are mind-boggling, machines for animals to feed. There are some origins of technologies such as pumps and tools. Because I'm in engineering, I've got them on. And what we do is we look at manuscripts, we understand what it is, and then we extract the information, we make them into an engineering drawing, and then we analyze, then afterward we do an animation and see how it actually works. There's some fascinating stuff there. We can do that after the talk. Let me just come, because you're well-informed and intellectual, and I must also finish so that we can have a dialogue. There are two concepts here about this attitude change and so on. The young people in the Muslim world we discovered. By the way, after Turkey, we got robbed by Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, and so on. And the same thing happened in America. A lot of young people from the West who feel that, we need to do something about it. That people, in order to talk to each other, they have to respect each other. Now, this concept of respect and appreciation, I found that is deeply rooted in the Muslim civilization. So we've been trying to find out what is it, why is it, what's gone wrong? Why did the Muslims go down? That's the question. But we said, no, actually, for Muslims, they shouldn't be asking that question. Muslims should not ask that question. Muslims should ask another question. This question of why it went down should be asked by the Americans and the Europeans, because they are about to go down. So they have to find out, how do we stay up? Right? What was the reason for this? Down. Right. But Muslims, they have to think of, find out, how did they go up? How did the Muslim civilization emerge and come up with such characteristics? That is what we want to find out. Now, there have been a lot of attempts of people. My being a professor of mechanical engineering, I am not a historian or a philosopher. With all due respect, I respect them. I've got time. I want something. It's like a simple model, simple equation, a simple model, so that it can stick to my mind and I can think about it. I know something very interesting. There must have been a reason. Why is it that people like al-Biruni, 92 years of age, after writing 200 books, on his deathbed, they are dropping water in his mouth, saying to him, "Fi amanillah," and then they tell him there's a guy come from a different city somewhere. His name is so and so, and he says, "Oh yeah," he said, "They come to bid him farewell because he's dying." So he says, he tries to get up to greet him. He couldn't. He said, "Young man, I have been looking for you for 3 years." What's that for? He says, "You have the solution to a problem." 92 years of age, in his deathbed, he has a problem, and he wants to ask this guy who's been looking. What was this problem? A mathematical problem. So people around him were wondering, what's going on in here? So he turns around, he says, "What will I answer my Lord, my Allah, when He has provided me with an opportunity to learn and I did not learn?" So that's what it's all about. This is what it's all about. 92 years of age. He sees an opportunity to learn and he would learn it. When you're going through this thread, thinking, you find out there's a lot of them like that. They have been driven by something else, higher purpose. Right? That is the secret of that rise. So, and in fact, if you try to find a very simple formula to describe them all, it can go for months actually. Each of them has a story, and you can write a book about it. It's very simple. It was there in front of my eyes. I didn't see it. I didn't see what I was looking at. The verse, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. It's everywhere in the Quran. Actually, it is in Surah Al-Asr, which is the short surah that we all use because we're in a hurry to do our prayers. So, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Oh, I see. What does this mean? You go and find out translation. You go into Yusuf Ali, Victor, and so on. They all translated, those who have faith, really, right? And do virtuous deeds. Amal al-Salih, they link it with Amal al-Taqwa. That means, you go and ask the fuqaha at the time, that, can you tell me what Amal al-Salih means? It makes sense. You do more salah, you do more zikr, you do more fasting, you do more reading Quran. When you look at the early Muslims, they didn't do that. What's going on in here? It's a different understanding. Actually, in those days, the word Amal al-Salih meant useful deed, not just Amal al-Taqwa. Right? See, Amal al-Taqwa, it feeds, improves the Iman. Right? But Iman is input, and the output is Amal al-Salih. Now, as a mechanical engineer, we have to look at mechanical systems. The simplest system for me is a car. It needs petrol. Input is petrol. Output, movement of the car. Amal al-Salih for the car, useful, is the movement of the car from one place to the other. That is useful. It took me, Dr. Azman and myself came all the way to come in here. That's useful deed. That's Amal al-Salih. Right? And it was the petrol. So what it is that these early people, they understood the functionality. Iman, connection with Allah, 5 times a day. He gets spiritual input, and there is an output, which is useful deeds to improve the quality of life. They didn't bother about which company they buy the petrol from. Petronas or Shell or Shia, Sunnah, Jafari, Shafi'i, Hanbali. To them, it did not matter at that time. It may matter to the chemist, chemical engineer, petroleum engineer, it matters to them. They decide, how much carbon content in here, how much, and what sort of, how much lead, how much, impact. That is important. But not the whole public. Not everybody is busy arguing about how much carbon there is in the petrol, right? This is a big issue that happened with decadence of Muslim civilization. They started thinking all the time and arguing, they are prepared to kill each other about the content of that petrol. And they forgot about the car. The whole purpose of this petrol is that Allah says you have been created to i'mar al-ardh. This is the useful thing. If you wanted to only purify petrol, then you become an angel, not a human being. Human being has to have input and output. Allah will look at your deeds. So these people, early people, they understood what it was about. In fact, it answered a number of questions. It answered why these people were so tolerant and work with the Christians and work with the Jews, work with the people who are not dealing with the Saudis, right? You find some of the names of scientists and so on, you think that they are actually Muslim. They were not Muslim. They were not Muslim, but they worked alongside with the Muslims. How is it that these people were tolerated and worked with them and they become so friendly? The only reason I could think of is that these people, they share the idea of pushing the car. They are part of the enhancement of amal salih in society. They did not want to argue with them. Okay, they tell them, look, my petrol really is the best. If you like, you're welcome. You go to Jannah, right? No petrol, got a problem. He's not going to kill him for it. He has a useful thing in pushing the society and improving the quality of life. You're a doctor or an engineer and so on. This is how, in my understanding, I think that formula of input and output fits this. So amal salih is useful deed. In fact, there is a converse behavior that the Prophet, peace be upon him, once asked the Sahaba. He says, do you know who is the muflis? Who is the... Is it... You know the word muflis? So they say, one who is penniless, has no fulus. It's the one. He does his prayers, salah. He does his hajj. He does his fasting. He pays his zakah. And he comes on the day of judgment. He stands for hisab. And then you get all these creditors come out. This fellow says you have backbited me. That woman says you have looked at me. That fellow says you have borrowed money and he did not return back. That fellow, they all want there. Right? So what Allah does, He takes the good deeds of this person and start paying. There's no checkbook anymore. Right? There's no bank account. So he pay out of his good deeds. Then he goes out of credit. There's still more creditors and he hasn't got anything. So what Allah does, He takes the bad deeds of these people and gives them, and then he will end up in hell. This, in my view, is negative efficiency, because the output is negative. His input was fantastic. His iman, fine. Output is terrible. So one day I was asked to give a lecture at some of the Muslim, boys, girls, and so on. I said, look here, Muslim people, we're all nice people. No matter how, but we've got no problem in our heart. That's good iman. The problem is here. We need a checkup from the neck up. A checkup from the neck up. Because the problem here is the practical aspects. This is how you find amal salih. How you define, how do you translate your iman into actual work. That requires the exercise of the mind. That requires planning. That requires intention. All your management, think about vision and planning and so on. It all comes with the a'malu bin niyat. So this is one thing that became quite clear, really, about this process of how the Muslim civilization in a very short time was developed, right? And because you had so many young people who were inspired, right? Who were inspired by, I mean, talking about explosion engineering comes in here. You know, in explosion, an explosive material is made out of material just like any other material, except one characteristic. If you were to take any material and you hit it somewhere, this impact here, it propagates like sound in air. It's called sound wave or shock wave. If this material was explosive material, when it propagates, how does propagation occur? Each particle kicks the one next to it, and then the other one kicks the one next to it, and so on. So in a non-explosive material, non-detonating material, this process decays the energy and it dies away. You know, sound goes far, or you hit the table and so on, you hit the water, and it dies away because of dissipation, energy disappears. With an explosive material, it's different. Each kick, it generates an internal energy of that next particle and ignites it. Each one of them is ignited. That's what happened with the Muslim civilization. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, came, people got energized. Each one of them, when they are energized, next door, his friend, his family, his others, they get energized the same way. So there is internal energy is released every time there is a contact and there is a movement. That shock wave, I call it detonation wave, it continues until today. You and I are part of that wavefront. It has started 1400 years ago by the Prophet. That was an explosion of light, of knowledge. It sparked, and it's still, you know, you've got all sorts of problems, internal issues here, politics, and our nations rise, and so on. But actually what happens is that this spiritual excitement of energizing people, because you and I are not driven because the government tells us to become Muslim. You must do your prayers. We don't do that. It's individually, isn't it? So each of us is connected. You get this input of amanu, iman, right? And then we try to do some amal salih. So the process really of leadership and of intellectual groups, of ulama, of governments, they should try to investigate more how to do amal salih. How do you expand the concept of sadaqah, for instance? See, when you go earlier, the waqf system was behind most of the science and technology and knowledge process. It was not driven by government. Government sometimes, yeah, say, okay, we'll give you 1,000 dinar, but most of these great scholars, they don't want to come even close to the ruler. It was driven by the waqf. Give you another example of al-Biruni himself, I think. You know, Biruni has, one of his great achievements is he measured the circumference of the earth. And he has predicted it by trigonometrical equation. Right? He wanted to do an experiment to find out how long is an arc subtending 1 degree on the earth. So he can multiply by 360, it becomes, he got a group, they did do the measurements, and then they got the measurement. It was different from his theoretical prediction. So I have to do the experiment again. But he says, I could not do the experiment because the waqf, 1,000 years ago, the waqf, the sponsor, the patron, has died. So the way it is done is by such people. Allah, you know, when I looked at this, I came to a friend who was a good businessman. You know, I said to him, if I ask you for money, you know, to measure the circumference of the earth, see your reaction. It looks like it's just a joke. Yeah. 1,000 years ago, a guy, it probably would have cost about maybe $10 million or maybe 20 to get such a huge party of people, caravans, measuring, pegging, and so on. Incredible feat. And then he gets financed. But he didn't finance it so that his name appears in the newspaper or so. This is fi sabilillah. So the guy must have understood the importance of this, to sacrifice such money fi sabilillah so that he can get Allah happy with him. To reach such a state, right, is essential for a revival movement in the Muslim world. If you don't have that kind of people, you don't resonate, you don't tune the aspirations of, with the people who have money and so on. So people in authority, they need to resonate with the people, young people and so on, and hence sponsorship. And the sponsorship comes from the Waqf system also. Unfortunately, the Waqf system in the Muslim world has been narrowed so much that it only gives money for the poor, gives money for the sick and so on. This idea of the Waqf to fund research and fund technology and so on has been taken from the Muslim countries, and now it drives the science and technology front in the West. Right, well, let's, I think I've almost exhausted my physical, so the idea, therefore, is, I've tried to touch upon a few things. Our foundation then grew, it expanded. It became necessary to respond to the demands of the market. We had to make them into products. And the market starts saying, we want this. Many people say, we want to have this material in our schools. So what did we do? We started thinking that we must have some teachers' packs. Because if you go to the government and say, you have to change your curriculum, oh, that's impossible. If you go to the West, most of the curriculum is decided from the base in society, is bottom up. In the Muslim world, it's top down. The minister decides everything. The ministers don't decide by themselves. They have these consultants around, and the consultants maybe, they have different ideas. So it's a complicated system. Each of them have a priority, they're all sincere, they're planning and so on. So what you do is, you provide resources, make them available, so that teachers and schools and in universities, they can pick them up if they require, if they really want to. If you want to inspire your students in the classroom, my advice to you is go and get something from the past, get some stories. You fire them up. Right? You will find that they will want to study, they will want to become somebody. It's important. Nowadays it's very important. I think what made me really realize the importance of this is what happened in Manchester in 2006 when we had the first exhibition in Manchester. And this man, by the way, Donald died, and the name of the exhibition, he founded that museum, so we wanted to honor him, and we have had the first exhibition, contributions in Manchester Science Museum of Science and Industry. One of the days, there was a young boy, about 17 years of age. He was visiting, and he suddenly picked up a chair in front of everybody. He stood on the chair. He held this first edition of the book. The other said, I feel I am a human being now. So I wasn't there, unfortunately. I could have, but what they said, I said, well, what's happening to you? What's going on? What happened, apparently? This guy is from Bangladesh. He doesn't come from Manchester, he comes from Leeds. And he was going through a terrible process, psychological process. He was about to commit suicide. Because in the school, this is 2006, they don't have these problems of Al-Qaeda and all this business and Islamic State. That's not that, suicidal things. This guy was feeling, because in the school he was feeling down, inferiority complex at its best, right? Doesn't fit in. And then he goes to his family and he finds, he doesn't like what he sees in the mirror. It doesn't fit, doesn't conform to society. So he's about to throw himself out of the window. See, such a person is ready. If somebody come to him and say, excuse me, brother, why you want to commit suicide like this and you go to Jannah? If you take with you 40 infidels, you go to paradise. So come with us. You go and do this, and then you end up there anyway. You're at the paradise with 70 hur al-'ain, So this paradigm is so dangerous, actually. When you get people who are fed up, exhausted, giving up, there's no hope of this West, there's no hope of this world, that's it. When he saw this exhibition, he said, I become a human being again. Why? Because you see, every person needs to be appreciated. He found that actually his his father, he comes from people who were the engineers of this. They were involved in the building of this. It's not anymore something. So he started thinking that if I really want to prove myself, I must be the best in the school. Right? I must become a Nobel laureate. What a transformation! Right? This is something that is really extremely important in terms of transforming people's behavior. So that takes us to somewhere really quite interesting about human behavior and about our courses. We need to find partners whom we can work with. Some universities have already started working with us. Maybe UTM, because I feel I am part of UTM. You know, I was a consultant to UTM a long time ago. You know, I was looking after your students. You know, instead of your cultural attaché, you know, I was employed by UTM with a colleague of mine. We used to go and inspect every PhD student and inspect the supervisor and make sure that they're behaving themselves. So, because we found that some of these students, they take years before they finish PhD. And they choose the wrong subject, they choose the wrong supervisor. Supervisor at the university has become money-making thing. You know, you just get a student, you don't have equipment, you have some. You need to organize the PhD process properly. So we came in to rescue the system. And anyway, that was a good experiment, started making conferences. So I feel that, you know, I am effectively really part of it. And we've had some interesting encounter recently in Oxford with your previous Vice Chancellor, with your predecessor, Sultana. Yes. I know her personally, actually. Right. And we have been in correspondence as well. So, you know, for me, I think that like some of the other universities that we're working on, what we do is we take your courses, plus we find volunteers, professors or teachers, you know, lecturers. We find willing volunteers to do this. So, okay, when I teach physics, we develop an additional supplement. So it is like a handbook or a supplement, and it will support me in the classroom. So I can get some of these stories to excite these young people. Or we make some assignments, right? And in fact, in Jeddah, one of the assignments about al-Biruni in measurements in architecture, the girls, it was a girls' university, Effort University. One of the assignments was that they go into the highest, tallest building. You know, I think you can do it here. You can go to this huge Petronas building. Because Biruni, the way to measure the circumference of the Earth, you know, if you imagine you have a circle and you have a radius, you extend the radius higher, so you have about, you know, something on the top, you know. And then you draw a tangent from the top of that line, from that top point, tangent to the point to the horizon. That's a right angle. And that angle, that trigonometry, you can actually measure the radius. Very simple. But of course, there's a lot of error because of the height of this. So they do this, they went to the highest, they all enjoy this fantastic lesson. They write reports. But what they're doing an experiment which elevates the understanding of the subject. It's still part of the curriculum, but the content brings them back to al-Biruni. And that's the idea. Right? You can do this in every subject. You use modern concepts without deviating from your actual syllabus, but you bring in the past and now. So what we want to do is get some volunteers. First, your management degree, right? And then at least say half a dozen of lecturers. They say, okay, we're going to give it a go. We give them some of this material. We work together so that this material is tuned to the way the syllabus is divided in the year. After finishing this, we make a conference and we assess, reading papers and so on, and you assess it. And it becomes something which is really exciting. Each of the staff, then they can have their own new book. It's a balanced syllabus, balanced curriculum. We are looking for partners to do that. That is, in our view, is very strategic and important, right? So, you know, I think that there is only one remaining thing about this whole project, and that is how do you get people to appreciate each other? You see, We have a verse in the Quran that everybody also knows about. But again, like the one about al-Hassani, it's also, there's a slight misunderstanding. And that is, Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. All people, so all people, not all believers, all people. We have created you from male and female, so that you know each other, so that you may know each other. The best amongst you is the one who is closer to Allah, most conscious of Allah. Actually, this word ta'arafu, which is translated in all those books that I looked at, they say, so that you may know each other. That's not quite right. Because the word ta'arafu has a long alif in it. Ta'arafu. It's actually so that you may appreciate each other. It's not about so you may know each other. What is the use of knowing each other? I know you are my enemy, so what? You're black, I'm white, this doesn't have any, so you may know each other. What is meant there is a mission here. This long alif is just a dynamic process of appreciating each other. And appreciation comes in by knowing the best side of you. You see, what I have been described today by Azman, they said my nice side. If my wife was here, she will tell you the real story. Right? So, you appreciate it because you know my best side. This is why we put in our CV. Like people, societies and cultures and groups, they need to be appreciated. So in order to produce this intercultural respect, intercultural dialogue, we should recognize and praise the contributions. So if we want to bring in peace between East and West, we tell the Western people, say, look here, you want to go and talk to the Indians, talk to the Muslims, you have to recognize what they're doing. Why are you taking it away? If you recognize, you appreciate, right? When you see a fountain pen, when you see an Egyptian, you say, we're thankful to you, because you guys, you have invented the fountain pen, right? It's very nice. So you go to the Chinese, you want to make a big contract with a Chinese businessman, you say, we are very grateful to you. You have invented paper. He says, all right, very nice, how much do you want? In this mind, it works like that. So, thank you so much for inviting me. I like to hear from you, so I hope we have enough time to do that. This was really just sort of ad hoc. As you see, I've not used any slides and so on. You're not here for entertainment. Let's try to sort of converge on things. Particularly it's about curriculum enrichment. If we can reach some deal, it'll be great today. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, again, you can see from Brother Salim's talk that he tried to dazzle with you with technical buzzwords and 1002 inventions. Those are certainly there, but it can be done in other occasions. What he did was, I think, to tell a few stories through parables, anecdotes, things that can touch our hearts. So this way I feel that he done a very good job, something I enjoyed the talk. And we really thank him for doing that service. I particularly like the story about Al-Biruni. I've read it many times before. That somebody at 92 years old, about to die, would still be curious to know the answer to a mathematical problem. Because it is an opportunity to learn so that he can justify to his creator that he has used his time well on this earth. I wish we could be like that. But going on from there, I can see that it's not just to learn. It is to do useful deeds. And I have to agree with him that in our culture, in our society, we tend to focus too much on the so-called rituals, which I'm not saying is wrong, but we have to divide them clearly, rituals are one thing to purify the soul and the heart and the mind, yet we have to do some useful deeds. And again, useful deeds alone must be measured in terms of creating useful outcomes. And he actually used the term quality of life. It is a current term, but it's very ill-defined. At the moment, it is defined in material terms. The Muslims have not come up with a definition that is more comprehensive. Of course, people are trying, using, of course, the Sharia and so on. But I think this is still superficial. We have to work harder on this issue to understand really what is before us. Because in the past, as Prof. Salim said, the Muslims knew. And as if they all went through school together and went through the inner workings of the mind and the heart. What Professor Nakib keeps explaining in his books on adab. I was given recently the review by Mariam Jamila of Professor Warma Mano's book. And I think this is happening very well. When I read the review by Mariam Jamila, she has actually captured all the key terms in one simple short essay. Why is it that the rest of society does not understand? It's a good question to ask, but it is our job to answer. If they cannot understand, we have to do more so that they understand. So let's go to the next step. I actually indicated to Professor Brother Zaini. I was expecting to see, or at least we expect to see here, people who are passionate about the subject. So now it's time for you to demonstrate your passion. We are not here just to give you a lecture, and you go away feeling happy, all done, life is goes on as usual. We have a lot of challenges. So let's hear from you. What do you think? What can we do together? What's the next project? What's the real challenge? So with that, may I invite? Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hassani. Pleasure again to meet you after our first encounter in Oxford. Of course, as Sentu was saying when we started the session, that our center and you, we have 80%, even 120% similarities really. At our center, we have recruited 70 or 80 passionate youngsters from the Asia region at least, who come from engineering background, who come from lower background, who study Arabic, go back to history, not to live in the past, but to connect the past with the present and the future, with great difficulty of course. And go back, that goes back to your problem just now, that we need to reorient our curriculum system. Because in our curriculum system now, all over the world, history is a negative subject, because it's regarded as less useful in a material sense. So to study Islamic history again, it's compulsory, and that compulsory is fardu ain, no longer fardu kifayah in that sense, because not knowing the history makes us inferior of our own religion. So that's one thing. I was thinking that maybe you can spend some time to visit your old friend, our current Chief Secretary at the Ministry of Education, to have a discussion with the curriculum expert at the Ministry. Because your last statement just now at the end of your session deals with them really. Yes? Because the teachers need to be oriented, the syllabus need to be restructured as such. At the university, of course, we can offer some courses, but not at the national level. The other thing is that the people who are aware of the fact that history is so important, people who don't like Muslims, have gone one step further. Whatever we have achieved in the past, Al-Biruni, Ibn Haytham, Ibn Sina, they say that their impetus was not from religion, but rather because of the contact with Greek civilization and Indian civilization. So there's now a revision of that history. And they are saying that we became backward because we started after Al-Ghazali to see the problems raised by the Greek philosophy. So I think rather than, not only we need to go back into history, but we need to see really what makes us superior at that time and what makes us backward again. There have been competing attempts to re-explain that we were strong because we encountered Greek philosophy, and we became backward after we left Greek philosophy. Thank you very much.
I really didn't intend to go into a debate about this issue, because there are many theories trying to explain what went down and the role of philosophy. What I think for us to do, there has to be a group who can deeply go into this and sort it out. Right? But we're dealing with a juncture in history that one needs to have priorities in our planning, our human resource training. I see your university and our universities that when they get informed about the past and derive some benefits, not all the past is good. I just mentioned to you earlier when Donald Caldwell told me about the history, I said, what do you want me to do history? History is all about killing each other. Right? So it depends on how you look at history. In fact, most people who look at history, they are very biased. Now I must say I had to be biased to look at history because I had to look at it through the science lens. If you look at it through the political lens, you'll see what I saw. When you look at it through the science lens and see how